You want to be an effective leader, but have you considered that you may be your own worst enemy and you're working against yourself every day? Most leaders don't even realize that they're losing. But today, we're calling it out and we're giving you the weapons that you need to defeat it. Welcome to Crossroads and Catalyst, the podcast with Shanita B. I am your host. This is where we discuss how a thoughtful, wise, and strategic perspective at a crossroads can be the catalyst for change. Well, thanks for joining me today. I've got your executive brief on the 5 biggest threats to your leadership effectiveness. And so we're going to spend some time to help you identify what those things are and how you can defeat them. Be sure to follow so that you can get the latest episodes. So the crossroads here is this: you're working really hard and you're putting in some hours and you're doing your very best to lead well, but you're just not where you thought that you were going to be. You know that something is off, but you can't quite put your finger on it. Your team is not responding the way that you had hoped that they would, and decisions definitely seem to be harder than what you thought that they would be. And you recognize that maybe sometimes the communication actually is not hitting the mark as you expected. So you're trying to figure out, well, what's going on, and maybe I'm just not leadership material. Well, let me help you to understand what's happening. You're not failing because you lack talent, okay? Or because you lack intelligence. You're struggling with, I think, what are 5 common enemies that tend to undermine our effectiveness. And most leaders battle with several of these. So it's not just you. But I want you to make no mistake, okay? The most persistent enemy that you will deal with is yourself, because self likes to place blame rather than accept responsibility. So this affects way more people than what they would actually like to admit. So the fact that you're listening means that you're taking it seriously, and that's going to help move you forward. So this affects just about every leader, okay? Every leader who I've ever known has had to deal with this in one form or fashion. So sometimes you're just kind of feeling like you've hit a plateau over the course of work that you've been doing. And so the stakes can be pretty high with this kind of thing, because these 5 enemies do not just limit your effectiveness, they actually can cap your career, because other people are watching and they're paying attention and they're trying to see how do you navigate these things. So then the leaders who choose not to defeat these and really pay attention to them and strategize to overcome them, then you're definitely limiting yourself. And you may find that you're going to remain at that particular level where you are, apart from what it is that you would really like to do. So there is good news though, okay? Because once you identify them, then you know that there's something that you can do to beat it. So the root issue is this: leadership effectiveness is not really just about what you do. It's about what you allow to undermine you. These 5 enemies show up differently for everybody. So you really can't always look at someone else and think that you're going to walk away with the same understanding, because their circumstances, their background, how they view life is going to be different from yours. So we're going to talk about some of these enemies so that we can outline them relatively quickly, and then we're going to talk about what we can do to overcome them. So, enemy number 1 is indecisiveness. This is a big one, in my opinion. And I say that all of these are big, in my opinion, because if you're serving as a leader and you want to continue on a leadership trajectory, you have to make a decision. Okay. Because this is what it looks like. Indecisiveness causes analysis paralysis, and therefore decisions get delayed. And then you find that you're waiting for perfect information. Well, there is no perfect information. So, what you're doing is wasting time. So, one of the reasons or how it kills your leadership is your team needs direction, and hesitation is giving incompetence. That's how people see that. They just think that you don't know what you're doing. So the cost is that the opportunities are missed and your team is having a lot of frustration. And not to mention, you should be having some frustration if you are one of those who tends to lean more indecisive. And then people lose confidence in your judgment, quite frankly. So then, enemy number 2 is ego, AKA lack of accountability. And I say that these are very similar because the ego prevents us from taking accountability. And this is what it looks like. We don't want to admit that there are mistakes. And we get defensive when people challenge us. or make a comment or statement that is in opposition or contrary to what we're trying to do or say. And then oftentimes people who are full of themselves or lack accountability, they end up taking credit for things that they didn't do, but they place blame for things that they did do. So, how does it kill your leadership? Well, it definitely kills trust because people recognize that you're really all about yourself. And therefore, it prevents you from learning and it alienates your team and your colleagues. Okay. Because sometimes they're going to, they're going to suffer from the fallout of whatever scenario is going on at that time. So the cost is going to be team disengagement, and for yourself, well, you have these blind spots, and these blind spots are definitely going to become disasters. So then, enemy number three, ineffective communication. This is something that every one of us should be in the constant process of doing is better communication. But this is what ineffective communication looks like: unclear expectations. So then uh, these expectations are already unclear, and then people assume that others understand. So you might assume that because someone didn't jump in and say, "Oh no, give me clarification," that they understood. And anybody would. Okay, so in all fairness, that would be the case. But the fallout is the work is not getting done, or you're not getting what you thought that you should, which goes back to those unclear expectations, which also means that somebody didn't understand something. And then there's also the poor feedback delivery. So it's just like it's a cyclical process that continues on. And so how does this kill your leadership? Well, your team can't execute what they don't understand. So then you're stuck. And so then the cost is, of course, there's misalignment, there's a lot of rework, and this, of course, leads to frustration, and which further goes on to some performance issues. And all of this is the result of ineffective communication. And your team is following your lead on this, right? And some people are hesitant to indicate that they may not be clear, or maybe they thought that they understood based on a pattern of behavior, but because there was never any clarification provided, well, they didn't think any differently, and maybe neither did you. Okay, so then enemy number four, lack of awareness. So, what does this look like? Okay, a lack of awareness. Well, we recognize that people with a lack of awareness have some blind spots, but you are certainly blind to the impact that you have on your team. And how does this play out? Okay, well, I'm going to spend just a couple of seconds on this because when you lack awareness, you don't even recognize how your team engages with you versus how they engage with one another. You think that maybe you're one of the crew. It's not like that. Okay? You have to understand that you bring a different mindset to the team, as you should, because you're the leader. And so then you're unaware of the team dynamics. And then you quite frankly, you miss the important signals because it just completely goes over your head. So then how does this kill your leadership? Well, how does it kill it? You can't fix what you don't see. So keep that in mind. And then the cost is ultimately that problems, they escalate unnoticed. You don't, they just get worse and they get worse and worse. And then your team, ultimately, they end up losing faith in your judgment. And this can definitely lead to reputation damage. And it can be a little bit difficult to recover when you have lost your reputation because it takes a long time to regain the trust when you have demonstrated that you have a lack of awareness. And then enemy number five, avoidance of conflict. So what does this look like? Well, when you avoid conflict, the conflict doesn't go away. They just go underground and they fester and they begin to boil to a point to where they kind of explode, which is definitely a, a really terrible thing. And you're hoping that problems resolve themselves, and they generally don't unless you address them head on. And, consider this, it is an unkindness to avoid conflict. So as the leader, you are there to help set the tone. And when you intentionally avoid conflict, you're setting the tone that it is okay for us to not deal with things not deal with problems rather as they arise. which allows them to get worse. So then how does this kill your leadership? Okay, like I just said, problems compound. And then the team is learning that this is the standard that we want to set. And so the cost of this is your poor performers stick around. A good performer, a high performer, they're not sticking around for that. They're going to leave. And ask me how I know. I've seen it and I've experienced it head on as far as being that person on the team that just I couldn't take it anymore. And so you just say, okay, I'm out. So then what are some critical questions that you should ask yourself? Well, here's one. Which of these five enemies shows up most in your leadership? And I want you to seriously consider this, okay? Because all of us have been impacted by it. And I would say uh, just the mere fact that human nature is inclined to protect itself, all of us are suffering from the ego. Ego. Okay, number two, what's the cost of letting this enemy continue to undermine you? Yeah, that's something to consider. And then here's a third question. Who on your team is suffering because you haven't defeated this enemy? Somebody is not pleased right now. They may be very dissatisfied as a result. Okay, so then we have three approaches here, and two of them will guarantee that you will continue to struggle. So here's your first choice. Choice A, deny that they apply to you. So if you do that, well, it's definitely going to protect that ego of yours, which can sometimes be quite fragile. And it will help you to avoid uncomfortable self reflection. Again, self reflection should be a little bit uncomfortable. And the good thing about self reflection is it's self. You're thinking, you're in your own thoughts. No one else is in your own thoughts. You don't have to share what you're thinking with anyone else until you're ready to do that. The con of this, of course, is that this is going to continue to operate unchecked and your effectiveness is going to stay limited. So go figure. And the reality of it is that leaders who need this most are often the ones who are most resistant to seeing it. Okay, so don't deny that this applies to you. Choice B, acknowledge but don't act. Now this is pretty bad because you're going to feel like you're making progress through having awareness alone. So it's not enough to just acknowledge it. Okay. Well, I know that you're hungry, but I'm not going to feed you. That didn't help. That didn't help the person who's hungry. It made you feel good about yourself, but it didn't help the other person. So then, uh, if nothing changes, then the awareness without the action is just informed and inevitable failure. It's not going to work. So the reality is, it's not enough to know. You have to take action against it. So then choice C is you have to identify, prioritize, and systematically defeat this. And this is not a one-time thing. This is something that you have to do repetitively. You have to keep yourself in check. So you should see some measurable improvement and increased effectiveness as you're going through making these changes, right? You've accepted that these are some of the things that have undermined your leadership effectiveness, and now you're ready to put a game plan in place. Now, like I said, because this is not a one time thing, you're going to have to sustain this effort. You have to make this a habit until it becomes second nature. And so then the reality is you've gone from a good leader to a great leader. Because again, it was never really about the talent and the competence. It was just really honing in and doing some self reflection so that you could understand what these things are that are undermining you. So then how do we defeat these? Okay, so when you're defeating indecisiveness, set some deadlines for yourself. Okay. Whatever it is that you have been putting off, I don't care how small or large it is, set a deadline and make a decision. Okay, that's your action. Defeating ego. Okay, this is going to require that you be vulnerable. So you want to publicly own a mistake. Okay, publicly own it. And then ask yourself, what can I learn from this? It's as simple as that. Again, start small. These do not have to be major things. And try that this week. Okay, so then when it comes to defeating ineffective communication, when you have communication with someone within the next week, what I want you to do is when you get to the end of that conversation, Ask this person, well, what did you hear me say? Or tell me something that you understood me to say in this conversation, because you want to make sure that you're on the same page. And when it comes to feedback, be very specific, okay? And give observable examples. People appreciate examples when you give them feedback because it's something that they can grasp, and then they can think through it and figure out what they might need to change. Okay, when it comes to defeating lack of awareness, this one is going to require that you ask for direct feedback. And you know that I'm all about asking questions. So just ask this question right here. What's one thing that I'm missing? And when you do this, if you're asking a team member, be sure to preface it with, I'm just thinking through some things on how I can enhance my own skills. What is something that you think that I am missing? And let reassure them that there are no repercussions that will come from the conversation. People need that assurance, especially when they're talking to their boss. Okay? And then another thing that you can do in order to defeat a lack of awareness is you want to observe your team body language and their energy in meetings. If people are shut down and they're not engaging, they're not talking, there's an issue there, and it's your job to get to the bottom of it. Okay. If you notice that people are squirming or that they're inattentive, they're looking at their laptops or on their phones or even just doodling and not giving eye contact, there's another issue. So you're going to have to get into the habit of reading people, read the room. Okay. That's what you have to do. Read the room. So do that this week. Okay. Do it this week. When you're defeating avoidance of conflict, hey, it's time to start scheduling some conversations that you've been avoiding, that you've been postponing rather. And what this is going to require that you do is you're going to have to schedule some time to sit down and have a conversation with whomever it is and address some things and be prepared. And by that, I mean, write an agenda and be very specific with the issues that you're going to address and the desired outcomes that you're seeking. People will appreciate that when you do it, and you'll appreciate it as well because you'll find it'll be a lot easier to walk through. And I did a couple of episodes 27 and 29, that address several of these enemies. So I will leave links in the show notes so that you can check those episodes out. And so moving on to our 30-day battle plan over the next few weeks, this is what I want you to do because you need to prioritize these. Okay. So, week one, identify which of these is your primary problem, your primary enemy. Okay. Week two, implement the specific action for that enemy daily. Because again, it's going to take an effort and a commitment on your part to prevent this from undermining you any further. Week three, ask a trusted colleague for feedback on improvement. Other people will tell you what they think. That's why you have to go to a trusted colleague, right? Week four, move to your secondary enemy and repeat. So as you're going through these, you're knocking it out, knocking it out, and you will see improvement. So here are some things that you should look for to determine if you've reached some level of success, and you can count these as wins. When you recognize that decisions get made faster and with less internal struggle, count it as a win. Okay. Team feedback indicates clearer direction and communication. You feel better when you know that you've communicated a message and it was received well. Here's another thing that you can look to determine if you've made any progress. Your problems get addressed before they get escalated to the next level. You just don't want issues from your department to be escalated to your boss or to another department. That's not going to feel good. Okay? So then what is the bottom line here? Every leader battles with these at some point because we're not always the best at assessing our responses and our interactions with people. And so this is why everybody has to deal with this. But as we continue to climb, uh, the leadership ladder, we have to be very specific and reflective about how we address our own behavior and the impact that it has on other people. Okay. So, again, the difference between a good leader and a great leader is not necessarily, um, how smart you are, but it's really how are you engaging with others, and are you setting a precedent for people to trust you and to believe that you will follow through, that you will address concerns, that you will be decisive? Or do they run from you when they hear that your name is called and that you will be the one responsible to make decisions because they know that you won't? Or whatever the other list of enemies that we just discussed. So, of course, the risk level here is high because the longer that we go without addressing these, the worse it gets for us. Now, notwithstanding, we know that there are a lot of people in high level positions who we know have not dealt with any of these things, and they made it to the top. Well, that's not you. Sometimes those things happen and we don't know why, but that's not you, and you're not that person. And because you're interested in being a great leader, you're going to deal with it. Okay, so then your timeline is this week. You have to select something from this list and take some action to defeat it. All right? Okay, so we're at the end of the episode today. So I am so glad that you decided to stick with me with this particular topic. There there's a lot to cover here. And again, I will leave some links to some episodes in the show notes for you so that you can check out those others. And take a look at the 4C decision tree so that you can work through your own situation. And that is the end of the episode. So I will plan to talk to you all next week. And remember, crossroads reveal who you are, catalysts shape who you become. Every decision matters. So make it count. Talk to you next week.